Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do my May wrap-up. So in May I read a total of 5 books and I also partially completed a couple others which I'm gonna talk about at the end of the video. So the very first book I read in May was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and that one was actually a reread for me. I've read this book on audiobook for the first time less than a year ago, and I just read it again on ebook with my book club. So just like the first time, I gave it 5 stars because it's an amazing book, and my opinion about it didn't change. I did remember it very well from the first read, but it just happened to be our book club pick, and I enjoyed reading it on ebook and seeing how it compared to the audiobook. And I would definitely recommend the audiobook, but reading it on ebook was also really fun. So either way, whichever you prefer, the audiobook is great and the ebook is also great. So The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, if you're not familiar, follows the story of Evelyn Hugo, Hollywood star who is in her 70s now, and she decides to give an exclusive interview for the first time in a really long time to this unknown author Monique. And Monique is very confused when she is specifically chosen for the job, and once she meets Evelyn, she finds out that Evelyn actually wants to give her her whole life story and not just a small magazine piece. One of the most scandalous things about Evelyn Hugo's life was that she had 7 husbands, and the story that she tells basically centers around the different chapters of her life, and they're kind of centered around the different husbands she has. And the story definitely shines light on different Hollywood practices and fame, and how it's not as clean and shiny as you would think. This book deals a lot with homophobia and LGBTQ representation, so I would definitely highly recommend that book for that if you're looking for something like that to read. I personally found Evelyn a fascinating character, and her life story is so different from mine that it was very fascinating to see how a person with a completely different mindset and goals in life behaves. And Evelyn is definitely an imperfect character. She has a lot of flaws and she's done a lot of things that many people would think she would regret. But it's very interesting to see her perspective on how she perceives her previous actions and just her reflecting on her life as a whole and the decisions that she made and how they got her where she is right now. And we also see a little bit of Monique's life and her discovering why Evelyn chose her specifically to write her biography and not anyone else. So that element of surprise is definitely very interesting. When I first read it, I was shocked. The book definitely does a great job exploring the Hollywood back in the 60s, 70s, and LGBTQ community being mistreated back then and kind of how it's evolved throughout time. And I just wanted to give a trigger warning for domestic abuse for that book. But yeah, it explores a lot of very important topics, and overall a very, very good book. So the next book that I completed in the month of May was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So this book I've been seeing around BookTube for forever, and it seemed like I was the last person on BookTube who hasn't read it. So I wanted to read it and finally be able to say that I read Station 11. And also just because of the whole pandemic, I'm very interested in the topics of pandemic and dystopian plots, and just in general kind of stories that are very reflective of what's going on in our real world. I know a lot of people are trying to avoid that and actually read some heartwarming, fluffy contemporary books that kind of take their mind off of it, but I'm the opposite. I actually really want to read more dystopian and just kind of want to read more pandemic books. So if you're not familiar with the plot of Station 11, it takes place post-pandemic world where 90% of the population has died out, and it's following specifically a group of people that are a traveling symphony and how they go from different communities and perform these Shakespearean plays. What's very interesting about the book is how it ties together all of the characters that we follow. So this book definitely follows a lot of different character perspectives, and while I usually don't like that, I think in Station 11 it was done very well, and how all of the characters were intertwined and connected and how their stories really related to each other really helped connect them and just keep them straight in my head, which I usually find other books not as successful in doing. Overall, I just really loved having those puzzles kind of click together in my head. It also follows two storylines, kind of the days leading up to and when pandemic just started, and 20 years after the pandemic happened and kind of the new world that the people we follow live in. So I gave Station 11 4 stars. I definitely really enjoyed it. I just found it a little bit hard to get through, but not because of the fault of the book. I just feel like the book would have been better if I read it in 1 or 2 sittings instead of stretching it out. I really don't like putting a book down and picking it up again. I usually don't end up enjoying a book as much if I do that rather than reading it all at once. So I would definitely recommend you try to read it in the shortest period of time, because if you stretch it out, it just kind of seems like disconnected and you don't really know who's connected to whom. And I did forget who the characters were at some points. So overall, it was beautifully written and it was wrapped up very nice. I definitely applaud Emily St. John Mandel for that. So would highly recommend. Okay, so the next book I read was actually a collection of short stories, and it's called Not That Bad: Dispatches from the Rape Culture by Roxane Gay. I've been in the mood for reading something really dark and kind of depressive, I guess. So I really wanted to pick something very hard-hitting up. This collection of short stories, basically authors who have experienced sexual assault, rape. It's a very heavy collection of short stories. Each short story is written absolutely beautifully. Obviously, there are so many authors in this book and they all had a distinct voice. And I actually listened to this on audiobook, and each short story is narrated by the author. And it's very nice to hear their voices and kind of how they tell their stories. It was very emotional. Obviously, there's trigger warnings for rape and sexual abuse and child abuse, molestation, a lot of trigger warnings. I would definitely, if you're somebody who needs to check trigger warnings for that kind of stuff, I would definitely look it up online, because there were a lot of heavy themes explored in this book. But it was absolutely beautifully written, and I did give it 5 stars. I enjoyed every single short story, and there were so many. I thought I was bound to not like some, but they were all beautiful and they flowed together really well, even though they were all unique experiences and were obviously written in a different way by different authors, but it was collected very beautifully, and I really enjoyed the foreword by Roxane Gay too. When I just started listening to the audiobook and I was just listening to the foreword, it hit me so hard because it was something so horrific, and I was just sitting there and I had goosebumps. It's so brave of these authors to write their story, and it was an amazing collection. Obviously, it was amazing in the sense that you got to learn about these stories. It was beautifully written and it was so eye-opening. Even though as a woman I do have experiences that definitely I could relate to, that were spoken of in the book, because not everyone experienced rape necessarily. Some people experience sexual assault, and I feel like it's very sad that most women do in fact at least once in their life, but probably pretty consistently experience sexual assault or sexual harassment. I definitely relate to a lot of experiences. Something happened and you just brush it off because that's how it is. It's just a really serious topic, and I think we kind of tend to put it out of sight, out of mind, because it's just something that always happens, and if you're really focused on this, it would just be non-stop, because it definitely happens all the time. If you're interested in these kind of stories, or if you want to educate yourself about rape culture and sexual assault, or if you're still questioning why feminism exists, I feel like this is a really good book to pick up, because it speaks volumes to people's experiences and it's so raw. I would definitely highly recommend it. It's amazing. So next up, after that, I read Sadie by Courtney Summers, and what I didn't realize was actually Sadie does deal with child molestation and child sexual abuse, just like the previous collection of short stories did. So I didn't realize that going in, but definitely trigger warning for that. But if you're not familiar, Sadie is a story about Sadie. She kind of left her life after her sister was murdered, and she went on this journey to find the killer, and it's basically following her and her trying to find this person that is responsible for her sister's murder. And also it follows this podcast host who is doing a podcast about missing girls, and Sadie is considered missing, so he's kind of investigating her story and what happened to her and what happened to her sisters. So he's kind of following her in her tracks and kind of trying to catch up with Sadie, and we kind of see how the stories intertwine. I thought I would either really love this book or really hate it, because I felt like there were people who really didn't like this book. I enjoyed this book and I listened to it on audiobook, and I definitely recommend listening to this one on audiobook because it's a full cast, well-produced audiobook. Probably one of the best produced audiobooks out there. So if you're an audiobook listener, 100% recommend doing that. There were certain aspects of structure of writing that I didn't enjoy. Specifically, I had a problem with people being interviewed on the podcast, and when the podcast host talks and he says a sentence and then he says, this person says this, and then that person just says like one word or one short sentence, and then he jumps back and then he says another sentence, and then another person just says like a short thing, and it's very disjointed. It just feels very choppy, which I didn't enjoy, and it definitely detracted from my overall enjoyment of the book because I felt like it was unnecessarily overproduced, and kind of the cast of characters was overflowing with too many people. Maybe it wasn't integrated as well as it could have been. So definitely had some issues with that. But overall, I really enjoyed the story. It was very interesting and not what I expected at all. And I definitely like when I read a book where the type of story and kind of the type of the atmosphere of the book is different from what I'm used to. And this story has this road trip, small town mystery vibe going on. And you get to know a lot of different characters and see their perspectives and kind of how they perceive other people and events. So that was very interesting. It was interesting to follow this small town, bigger town kind of dynamic and how it affects how people behave basically. So that was very interesting. I enjoyed that. The atmosphere was definitely one of the stronger parts of the book, I think. And I really appreciated Sadie's love for her sister. It kind of struck a chord with me because I have two younger sisters, and just thinking about the things that happened to Sadie and to her sister and how she was affected by her sister's death and brutal murder. It was very sad and touching, and I'm almost crying again. Yeah, I really enjoyed sister dynamic being so prevalent in the book. I wanted it explored even more. I wanted to see more of the past, but I think the parts that were included in the book were well done. I enjoyed that. I think I gave this book like 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't outstanding, but it was definitely the kind of book that I would recommend others to read. Yeah, very nice small town atmosphere in this one. Okay, and the last book I read in the month of May was Fame, Fate, and the First Kiss by Casey West. So I've read the first book in this companion novel series, Love, Life, and the List, last year. So because I've been reading these very heavy topic books, I wanted to kind of relax my mind a little bit and kind of get a palate cleanser. Even though I wasn't really in the mood for it, I just felt like I needed it for my mental well-being to not read more of the heavy books that I tend to read and kind of just read something very heartwarming and fluffy. And so I picked this book up, and I have to say I enjoyed this one so much more than the first one actually. I loved following our main character's story. This book was amazing. I loved it so much. I just objectively can't give it 5 stars, but for my enjoyment, it definitely deserves 5 stars. I enjoyed it so much, and I read it basically in 2 sittings. It was so fun. Basically in this story, our main character is an aspiring actress, and she got a chance to act in this zombie movie alongside this very famous actor, but she's just an up-and-coming star. Nobody really knows her. Basically, on set, things start to go wrong. She starts losing pieces of her wardrobe, lights start falling, and basically these different things start going wrong that seem to surround her, and she starts getting suspicious that somebody is targeting her. And also her schoolwork isn't going very well, so her father actually hires a tutor, much to her dismay, to come and help her with completing her schoolwork. Even though she really wants to focus on her acting career, she's kind of forced to do this very boring schoolwork, and she's very frustrated by it. But the further we go, we kind of see this hate to love kind of romance blossom, and it's very sweet and very fluffy, and I definitely enjoyed the mystery aspect of it. It was very well done. I actually didn't really know who was the culprit. The romance was very enjoyable and definitely not too overbearing. Obviously this is a contemporary romance book, so I knew what I was getting myself into, and I'm not a big romance reader, but this one I really like the balance of mystery and kind of her aspirations to be an actress and the romance. It wasn't even such a major theme for the majority of the book, and would highly recommend checking out Casey West's work overall. I only have read these 2 books, but I definitely want to check out more. If you're looking for very nice, fluffy, contemporary romance, but also with some substance, and not just main characters being like, oh my god, guys, googly eyes, romance, love. One thing I love about Casey West's characters is that her heroines have their own aspirations and goals in life, and they have a personality outside of just a relationship or outside of just being interested in a certain guy. The first book followed an artist, which I really enjoyed because I'm an artist too, so I really loved seeing our main character in that book. And this one is an actress, and their aspirations and kind of their career paths are very prominent and discussed pretty extensively in both of the books. So I'm confident that other books by Casey West also have the themes of being your own person, having your own goals and motivations. I think she's very strong at that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think I gave it 4 stars. So overall, it was a very successful reading month. I enjoyed everything that I've read, some things more than others, but I'm really pleased with how diverse my reading experience was. I'm very pleased that all 5 books were very unique and very different. I just wanted to touch on a few books that I'm currently reading because I've been reading The Hunger Games on and off. I'm trying to reread all of the Hunger Games trilogy before reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I just received in the mail today, so very excited for that. So I'm about halfway through The Hunger Games. I'm enjoying it so much. So I'm definitely hoping to finish The Hunger Games very quickly because I am planning to read Catching Fire and Mockingjay as part of a readathon for this month, so need to get on that. And then I've also been reading Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the second book to the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I haven't been consistently listening to this book for some reason, even though I really loved Stalking Jack the Ripper. This one, there's nothing wrong with it. Again, I just really should listen to books very quickly. Once I start dragging them out, it just doesn't work for me. So I'm also currently reading The Kingdom of Back by Mary Lou. I'm halfway through the book. It's a really nice book. I'm enjoying it so far. I was definitely hoping to finish it by the end of May, but didn't happen. Hopefully I will be able to finish it pretty quickly. I'm listening to it at like 1.5 speed. I'm not enjoying it as much as I thought I would, just because Janine from This Story Ain't Over hyped it up so much, and we have very, very similar reading tastes, so I thought that I would be loving it as much as she did, but so far it's just good. And the last book that I just started reading, and I really should be much further ahead in for my book club, but I'm not, is The Institute by Stephen King. Hopefully I will catch up. Sorry, my book club people, I know you're watching, and I will get on it as soon as possible. Okay, so that was my May wrap up and my current reads. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if you are interested in these books, let me know down below in the comments. I love hearing from you guys, and let me know what I should read next. If you have any recommendations, I would love to hear them as well. Thank you so much for watching again, and I will see you in my next one.